Welcome to the Queen Trail Podcast.
There are three different types of radiation, alpha, beta, and gamma.
What does this technology do? It's like, well, what can you do with electricity?
I just survived 30 years HIV positive. I'm certainly not going to let a little thing like a brain tumor derail me.
When I got to 29 pounds, I was so tired, I just collapsed.
Everything always goes back to being grounded and centered.
It's a mecca for cycling, for sure.
Struggle is the neutralizing force.
And I said, there it is. This is the right family. I got like cold chills.
It's one lone oak tree right in the middle of the trail. It's beautiful.
Hey everyone, I hope you had a great week since the last time that we got together. Welcome back to the second part of my talk with poet, educator, creative, and free spirit, Tamara Madison. And there is a beautiful poem, perhaps it is my absolute favorite of hers, that is called Sequoia Sermpervirens, which Tamara reads towards the end of this episode. This second part is shorter than the first, but I promise you will savor every word. There's a lot that I love about having the luxurious gift of going back to edit and re-listen to talks with friends. It's like reconnecting all over again. And in doing so this time, I recognized how luscious and rich and warm Tamara's voice is. It's so soothing. You should totally do voiceovers, Tamara. So I thought I'd share another update on my knee, and I promise I will do my best not to bore you with these. But I'm now in physical therapy, and it was really interesting because the therapists were kind of upset that I was already there, only like 2.5 weeks out of my surgery. And they said that they normally don't start until around 4 to 6 weeks. So it kind of left me feeling like I was receiving bad medical care. But also at the same time, I just have this strong desire to get better. It's been like 10 months since I've been able to do anything. You know, you kind of need to move, right? And this past Tuesday was my second session, and they said they were going to put me on the stationary bike. That seemed way too early for me. But, you know, as soon as I sat down, I was like, oh my God, I miss this so much. And I wasn't able to do like a full revolution with the pedals, but I went from 50 to 60% range at the beginning of my session to about 85 to 90% range. So I was almost able to do a full revolution backward. Forward, it was a little bit harder, but that's not bad. You know, I really pushed myself, and I'm super proud of that. My third session was Thursday. I was hoping they were going to put me on the bike, which they did. And, you know, it was really interesting. It's so weird how your mind works. Like, stuff just passes through there. And, I always have a story associated with everything, and it's usually about these awesome people who are in my life. And this podcast is really nice because it is proof when you get to listen to my amazing friends that I do have amazing people in my life. And unfortunately, Ella Jean Bollinger, who popped into my head, passed away in May of 2014. So I'll never be able to bring her on here, but I can tell you about her. She is a former neighbor of mine, a former friend, badass diver, and she'll forever be an inspiration to me. She was the first Black female dive instructor inducted into the Diving Hall of Fame in Hawaii. And interestingly, like, you would have never known any of this stuff about her unless you were in the diving industry. I mean, like, around here, she was just the nice lady who would go out and water her beautiful front yard garden. When the kids would go up at Halloween to knock on her door, she always forgot that it was Halloween. And so she would go running for her coin jar and just grab a big fat handful and throw it in the kids' bags. Like, they just thought they were rich. I mean, she was a treasure diver. And so here she was giving treasure to the kids. You know, my kids just loved that. That was their favorite door to go to. And, you know, she was just the person who would invite you into her house. She'd give you persimmons from her tree in the backyard. And just want to find out how you were doing, like it was never about her. And she would be gone for long periods of time because of her diving schedule. So it wasn't rare to like not see her for months. And I saw her husband one day, and I think it was like the middle of summer, and I was talking to him and I asked him where Ella Jean was diving at. And he said, oh, she passed away in May. So it had been a couple of months and I didn't even know. And that's how, that's how humble she was. She was like 75 when she passed away. And her husband was 71. And he was an underwater welder. These folks were diving and doing all of this crazy like superhero stuff in their 70s. I mean, like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. It was really amazing. And she died because of cancer. I think everybody has been touched by cancer. And you know what? Last week I read that there's been some progress. There was a study that they did with a drug, I guess, that seems really promising. The cancer's not coming back. So my fingers are triple and quadruple crossed because it's just such a terrible disease. But here's the thing. She excelled in an industry where she had like 3 strikes against her. She was Black. She was a female, and she was like well into her 30s when she started diving. She was considered old, and this was a male-dominated sport, and she dove until she was 75, right before she passed away. She went on to become the first Black woman worldwide to become a scuba instructor and an international legend of diving. She became a specialist in training, co-authoring a book that was entitled When Women Dive, A Female's Guide to Diving and Snorkeling. And that sold out super quickly because at the time, this was a male-dominated field. Everything was. Like, she had to dive with these big, giant, heavy tanks that were designed for men. And she wasn't a big lady. So she and one of her friends, they wrote this book. It became huge. It inspired a lot of women to become divers. And it also inspired the making of smaller tanks, gear, scuba diving suits, and all of that sort of thing that were smaller and safer, really, for female divers. And because they didn't anticipate the response, they ended up selling the rights to that book for pennies. And it took them years to buy back the rights. It's a book that's still used today. And during her career, she was an instructor. And she also is credited with saving many men because, again, she was usually the only female on the crew. And it was like in 2000 that she was inducted into the Women's Diver Hall of Fame. And I do remember seeing all of those scuba tanks and the equipment filling her garage. So she was diagnosed with bladder cancer, and it was a really aggressive cancer. And at a certain point, she was forced to have her bladder removed. And here's why she popped into my mind. I mean, like, you might be going like, oh my God, Sil, what does all of this have to do with you getting on a stationary bicycle to rehab your knee, right? Well, here's what it has to do with that. I know I always have these long stories. She went back to diving after her bladder surgery 6 weeks out. I mean, she was like, nothing's going to stop me. And that's so inspiring to me. So she went back to diving, and get this, she was 73 years old at that time. So she had a really long, illustrious, wonderful career before all of this happened. And, it's very sad that she had to deal with this, but it just tells you how strong, and not just the strength, because I think a lot of times, we're like, oh, just be strong, just, get through this. But it was her passion for life. And that's so important to have that. Like, I am dying to get back on a bicycle and not have to worry about my knee not carrying me. It's, to me personally, when I run, when I ride a bike, when I'm hiking, when I'm snorkeling, whatever it is that I'm doing, all of this stuff that needs my knee, it's exciting to me to be able to move my body to propel myself through the water or through the air, the feel of my muscles moving, and that in itself, just that energy that's needed to be expended, and probably the endorphins and all that stuff coming in. But it's just such an amazing experience to me every single time that I just love it. Like, I don't want to be kept from that. And I also don't want to be kept from these amazing places that I go to, when I hike. Like, I'll go 20 miles to go somewhere that nobody else has ever been, or, that very few people have ever been. And then I'll hike out the 20 miles. And it doesn't matter how high it is or, how hard that hike is. I'm going to do that. And I want to be able to do that. I've got a passion for that. And I think that it just inspires me even more to know that Ella Jean also had that passion. And she is an inspiration to me because of that, so hopefully I can inspire somebody else. But here's the thing. So she went back to diving and the cancer came back and it attacked her small intestine. And she was on a treasure dive in the Philippines. She'd been hired, she'd been recruited to do this dive. So, it became a tumor and it caused a small bowel obstruction. And she went to see a doctor. They did, whatever type of imaging they had to do to see this tumor. And they were like, you need to go see your doctor ASAP. Like, go, you got to have surgery. And she was like, I've got 3 more days of diving. And so she finished that dive. She did 3 days with this small bowel obstruction. And then she had the surgery and she waited 3 weeks and she was back out there. And I need to say this right here. I am not advocating for anybody to go against their doctor's orders. Talk to your doctor. Do what is best for you. Do not follow my plan. I am not telling you to do anything that you shouldn't be doing. I am just sharing my personal experience with my knee and my recovery and how Ella Jean inspired me. Because you do not want to do anything that's going to get you re-injured and set you back. Always, always, always do what the medical professionals tell you to do. Anyway, she was back to diving 3 weeks out from that second surgery. And unfortunately, the cancer came back, just started metastasizing, and she did pass away. But I'm going to tell you, she bowed out on her own terms. I mean, she took in and held on to every moment of life that gave her meaning and taking her time, leaving her mark. So anyway, she popped into my mind, and check this out. Okay, after that long story, I was able to pedal fully, to do these full revolutions with the pedals for 10 minutes straight. I mean, like, I was not going to win a race. I was going very slowly, did not build up a sweat at all, but I went for 10 minutes and I probably could have gone for 20. So I'm super excited about my recovery. And yeah, so anyway, let's get back to my In the Company of Friends talk that I had with Tamara Madison. It is really great. You're going to enjoy it. So grab a cuppa. Here we go. Few questions that I actually did want to ask. And, when you were talking about rhyming and kind of having that, not necessarily a rhyme, but having a rhythm, and you put the articles in there and it gives it a different beat. And so you've got, maybe a little bit of syncopation going there with the words. Have you ever put any of your poetry to rap, or like a good rap song, Because, I mean, that's so poetic too. That's almost like musical lyrics are almost like modern day poetry. Some of them are really deep. Some of them are really, really, really good. And then you do have this proliferation of others that are just very superficial. Have you ever tried to put your poetry to music?
Well, I haven't. On the subject of rap, when rap first came out, I had a lot of hope for it, but I have not been that impressed with too much of the rap that I've heard. But I've never tried doing that. I have written a song, but it's not like one of my poems. It's more like a song. And I guess my son put one of my poems to a song, and it was really nice that he gave it to me for Christmas one year. And just singing it to me.
Oh, how lovely.
He was very poetic. But it was really nice. And I don't think he remembers how it goes or anything, but it was nice. And somebody else put a different poem of mine to music. Yeah, it was okay. But it's a goal because now that I'm retired, I've resumed playing guitar again. And I do envision at some point getting comfortable enough to write some more songs. I'd like to do that.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. I think you'd be really super good at it. And you just said something that made me think, do you think that there is a clear distinction between song lyrics and poetry?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, not always. I mean, Leonard Cohen was a poet and a songwriter. His songs always rhyme and they always have a steady rhythm, and which I think is interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of Joanna Newsom, but her songs are very literate, but they don't necessarily rhyme. They don't necessarily have a rhythm. She makes them work with the music by giving them extra time or whatever, It's very interesting.
I'll have to listen to her. Yeah, I like that. It just made me think of Tom Waits.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of what he writes. One of my favorite songs by him is Chocolate Jesus. I don't know if you've heard.
I have heard of that. I've heard that song. Yeah, Chocolate Jesus. I like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a fun poem, really. And, he's just talking about how he doesn't go to church, but he goes and he gets this chocolate Jesus at Rosalia's candy store every Sunday. And if it's really hot outside and his chocolate Jesus melts, he can pour it over a nice parfait. And yeah, there's like this juxtaposition between the nourishment of religion and the nourishment of Jesus in chocolate form. And it's just like, it's such a great song, but he is very poetic, definitely, in what he writes.
Yeah, I like Tom Waits.
He's a lot of fun. So is there a process when you write? Earlier when we were talking about the place that dreams go to commiserate with each other for, all the reasons that they didn't get to come true, you jotted down some notes, but are you writing your poems in one fell swoop? Are you thinking about them, or do you just kind of find yourself like feverishly looking for a pencil and paper to write down your idea and then it's done?
Wow. Well, sometimes an idea will come to me. Usually it's at night when I'm getting ready for bed, and I'll get an idea and I'll just jot the words down, but I don't bother to turn it into anything because it won't be any good. And I just, in the morning, I'll pick it up, what I wrote, I'll look at it, and then maybe try to write a poem about it. But, a poem is never is perfect, or seldom. I guess occasionally it might be perfect right immediately when it comes up, but that's pretty rare. Usually I'll do a lot of different rewrites and it'll sit on my desk for a long time. It'll sit on my desktop as well. And I like to have the paper copy too. It's just easier to really think about it than on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time for the most part. I always start out longhand, and it's difficult for me to write. Physically, it's difficult longhand. So I'll write a draft that way, and then I'll move it into the computer right away. But I keep the initial paper because I need to refer to it sometimes. And I think it's a good idea to get your body involved. And so early on, I used to just compose everything on my computer, but I don't think that's really as good a way as to really get your heart involved in it by physically writing.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I will write things out longhand sometimes when the idea strikes me, but my mistake is going back to reread it. And then I start thinking, oh, I could have used a better word, or that's not exactly what I wanted to say. That's not conveying the idea exactly. And then I'm scratching things out, or I'm erasing, or I'm finding a different color pen so that I can distinguish between.
Oh, yeah. I don't do it on paper that long.
Yeah. And as soon as I start doing that, I'm in the office on the computer, just clacking away. I love the fact that you can type something up and just seamlessly go back and change it. And when I first started working, we had typewriters, and I remember that we had, it must have been a Brother typewriter. I was super excited about it, which, makes me sound completely ancient, and I probably am to a lot of people, but
it's electric. You're talking to
yeah, it was an electric typewriter, and it had 2 ribbons. So it was black on top and red on the bottom. And, you hit a key on the keyboard, and that dictated whether you were going to type in red or black. But then it had a whole other cartridge, this second ribbon, which was basically dry whiteout.
Right.
And if you made a mistake, you could go back and retype exactly the wrong thing. And now you could go back and retype over it. It just took forever, but I just thought it was the greatest thing ever.
I was the master of that stuff. I worked as a secretary. I worked for a think tank when I was going to school in Washington. And we used to do like huge tables. It was econometric modeling and stuff like that. So it'd be these huge tables, like on the ultra big paper. And somehow I learned how to do it, just eyeballing it, how to make a table back before word processing. It was really not that hard once you got used to it. But then they'd send it to whoever was paying for it, and they'd say, no, those numbers are all wrong. Change the numbers to this is. Then I get this thing back. And I actually learned how to feed it into my IBM Selectric in the right way so that I could actually go back to that line and hit the backspace key and white it out. I don't know. I'm still amazed at myself that I could ever do that.
Yeah.
And then shortly, after a few years, then word processing happened.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, that made it really easier, a lot easier. But I missed that. I missed making the tables that way and feeling brilliant.
Yeah, it's a much more creative process. It's kind of like when I went from driving a stick shift to driving an automatic, and I didn't know what to do with my clutch foot and my shifter hand for a long time. I felt like something was missing and I wasn't doing enough.
Something was missing. I love a stick shift. But I'm never probably ever going to have one again, and neither will you probably.
Probably not. They make them less and less, and everything is automatic.
Yeah, I'm on my second Prius, and it's the best car I've ever had. I love it. But I do miss my Mazda 626.
Mazda 626.
Stick shift. That was nice. Both my kids learned how to drive that. My daughter drives a stick shift now.
Yeah, my first car, the first car that I bought, my uncle went with me, and I had only driven automatics up to that point, and I kind of fell in love with this little red Pulsar with T-tops, and it only came in stick shift, and my uncle insisted that I should buy it. If that's the car you want, that's the one that you should buy, and it's really, really easy. I'd never driven a stick shift, and I put down money. I purchased it in Cerritos, and I had to drive the jerky, dying drive out of the driveway. It was just, I think I killed the engine about 3 times trying to get out of that dealership driveway. But by the time I got home, I knew how to drive that car.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Yeah.
What is it? Was it Maya Angelou describes having to drive a stick shift when she was like 8 or something in Mexico? That's this hairy story that she writes. What a story. Back when she was just a little kid. Anyway.
Yeah. I was wondering if you would mind, do you have a favorite poem? Would you mind reading one?
I wouldn't mind reading one. I don't have a favorite, though. Well, let's see. Is there one that you'd like me to read? I don't have a favorite.
Oh, I have so many favorites. I think that the first poem that I ever heard you read was the Sequoia Sermpervirens.
Oh, Sermpervirens from Wild Domestic. Yeah. Okay, and I'll read Sequoia Sermpervirens now. Because it's summer and they're burning. It's awful. Sequoia Sermpervirens. Some of these trees have been here since Jesus walked on water. Some of these trees have been here since Vikings drove their boats onto the shores of Newfoundland. Some of these trees were seedlings while the Mayans were worshiping time, while the dire wolf and saber-toothed tiger roamed North America. Some of these trees have survived lightning strikes and forest fires. Some of these trees house creatures of the forest floor in burned-out caves at the base of their ruddy trunks. Some of these trees have become living pipes, chimneys hollowed out by fire. They've grown beyond their trauma and focus now on the daily climb, the adding on of needle and bark, on nature's drive to rise above and see beyond, until the day when death will fell them, and the earth will add them to its riches. We can be like these trees, pull on the layers of living like fine new garments, house the needy in the caverns of our grief, grow beyond the stories of our scars, stretch our branches toward the bristling stars. There was some rhyme in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You feel yourself being part of that tree and that forest and the life, you know. Yeah, it's sad that a lot of them are burning.
Yeah, let's hope they won't all burn and they'll live to make more of themselves when it's safe.
Yeah. I just went 2 weekends ago, just before I had my surgery, to a Jurassic summer camp for adults. It was great.
Whoa.
Only thing is, it was really super hot. But while we sipped our wine, we took a tour through the Arboretum, and we stopped at the various trees and learned about where their beginnings were in the evolutionary process. It was really interesting. I don't remember what the periods were, but a short million years before the dinosaurs arrived, the first conifers were growing on the earth. And during that talk, I found out that there are 12 remaining original of these conifers that start with a W. I forget what they're called, but I'll put it on the show notes. They are from this period, and they were found in the Blue Mountain forests of Australia. And I guess once it became like a protected park, the rangers were walking around, inventory what was there, and they came upon these trees, and they were like, we've never seen these. And so they did the carbon dating and all of this stuff. And so when they had those fires in Australia, I think it might have been like I think it was 2020 actually, because everything went to hell in 2020. And I think that's when those fires were raging there. They actually had protective fire retardant fabric that they wrapped around these trees. And they had like the hotshot firefighters that were out there watering these trees down while the rest of the forest burned down.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
If you had one thing to share with the world, what would it be?
Well, if I had hope, I'd share that with the world. A desire for hope. How's that?
A desire for hope.
No, I don't know. I do have hope. I have faith in something.
I think that life gets really, really crappy and, life is difficult. But then all of a sudden, it's like really wonderful. So I think we have to go through our trials and have that hope that, that faith that we know that it's actually going to be okay in the end. I think we lose hope because a lot of times we just don't want to go through the process. Like the challenge is overwhelming or, just can't I just have a cake life from here on out? I already dealt with too many challenges. I don't want to deal with another one,
Well, something I'm saying a lot lately too is that we're lucky. We can still enjoy what there is to enjoy in the world. We're not getting shot at. We're not getting bombed. We're not starving. And I feel like as artists, it's up to us to appreciate the things in the world that need to be appreciated and to share that appreciation with everyone. So that would probably be a better answer than my original answer about hope.
I like that. And the last one, because I can hear Puppy just dying to get out there, is how can people find you, your poetry, your books, your live readings?
Well, I have my website, tamaramadisonpoetry.com, has all of that. And gosh, I'm going to be reading somewhere soon, and I don't remember where or exactly when, but it will be when I get the information, it'll be on there too. And I have an author page on Amazon. I've never looked at it, but I know it's there because I made it. And that's probably the best way. Yeah.
Well, I did look at your author page on Amazon because I got Wild Domestic and Marine from you directly at book readings, but I did get Along the Fault Line from Amazon. So it works, and it's got everything on there, and I will be posting a link to that. We covered so much in this episode: the inspiring and indefatigable spirit of Ella Jean Bollinger, and of course, the ever-inspiring Tamara Madison. I hope that there was something in this episode for everyone, whether it's inspiration to push forward, inspiration to write, a reminder of what life was like before everything became automatic, or, like Tamara said, to appreciate the things in the world that need to be appreciated. She is always a poet and always an inspiration, and so honest. As always, I'll post links in the show notes about everything that we talked about. Don't forget to send me your questions and suggestions. I read every one of them, even when I don't have the opportunity to respond to them all. Please be sure to rate this episode. It only takes seconds, but your ratings really do help move this podcast closer to the top of searches so that my friends and I can reach more people. I'm looking forward to sharing more upcoming In the Company of Friends talks with you. So be sure to follow me on the socials and the .com, all at The Queen Trell Podcast. That's TheQuainTrelle Podcast. I am still Annan, the Queen Trell, and until next time, I wish you passion, grace, adventure, inspiration, drive, appreciation, elegance, and beauty. I just think that nobody ever thinks that they're nearly as interesting as they are. You know, we all just kind of go along our lives doing what we do. And, you know, I wish I could write poetry like you do.
Well, you know, there are people who think they're a whole lot more interesting than they are.
That's the flip side, right?
Yeah.
For reference, this is me talking about all of my favorite poems by Tamara that I have marked. There's so many. I have hearts on a lot. I've got hearts on Doors. I've got hearts on that Midsummer. Oh, Democracy Bar. That one's like really, really good. Such a great diss. What Now Is Like. I'm sitting here flipping through Gimme Your Clouds. I like that one. I have a heart and an exclamation point on Meal Moths.